Unlimited. It is my honor to welcome you to the historic public lecture by His Excellency Rala Xanana Gusmão, Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste, right here at the Institute of Diplomasia and Foreign Relations, Malaysia. Boa tarde, nosso Loximo Excelência Senhor Primeiru-Ministru e Hafatin ne IDFR. Obrigada, Wayne.
I'm honored to be here today, Excellency, in your presence, among many esteemed guests, to moderate an important session entitled International Diplomacy in an Increasingly Fragmented and Fragile World. Before we begin our session, although I know that Your Excellency requires no introduction, but I would still briefly introduce Excellency to our audience today. As we all know, His Excellency Xanana Gusmão is a key figure in the independence movement of Timor-Leste, born in 1946, and he led the resistance, Timorese resistance, which achieved independence later on for the people of Timor-Leste, and later became the first elected President and Prime Minister of Timor-Leste. Excellency Gusmão joined the public administration in 1966 and was involved with the Revolutionary Front for an Independent Timor-Leste, Petaling, the political party that became the central force in Timor-Leste's fight for independence. After Timor-Leste gained independence in 2002, Excellency Gusmão was elected President of the Diplomatic Republic of Timor-Leste until 2007, and then he became Prime Minister, and as Prime Minister he focused on national unity, economic growth, and the country's development plan. He stepped down in 2014, but continued to serve in various roles, including as Minister for Planning and Strategic Investment, and later as Special Representative for Maritime and Land Border Negotiation with Indonesia and Australia. His Excellency Gusmão also played a major role in the creation of Timor-Leste's blue economy and continued negotiations on maritime boundaries as Prime Minister again in 2023. Throughout his career, he received numerous international awards and honorary doctorates, such as the Distinguished Sakharov Prize by the European Parliament in 1999, and also the Sydney Peace Prize in the year 2000, reflecting his contribution to peace, governance, and international relations. Without further ado, I would like to respectfully invite His Excellency Xanana Gusmão, Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste, to the rostrum to deliver his public lecture. You have the rostrum, sir.
Thank you for your help. Good afternoon and salam sejahtera. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a profound honor to stand here today at the esteemed Institute of Diplomacy and Foreign Relations. You know, because a center of excellence in diplomatic training and the Institute. Your dedication to fostering understanding and preparing leaders for the complexities of international relations has made IDFR a vital institution not only for Malaysia, but for our entire region. Timor-Leste greatly values our collaboration with ASEAN and the opportunities afforded to our diplomats and officials trained here, equipping them with the skills to navigate an increasingly complex and fragile global environment. Challenges of diplomacy today are as daunting as they are necessary for us to face. History teaches us that every age brings its share of uncertainties, conflicts, crises. Just as with Malaysians, the turns of history have had a dramatic impact on the lives of the Timorese people. These turns have included colonization, occupation, the Cold War, and its chaotic end. The Asian financial crisis and the fall of the Indonesian regime, the restoration of independence, and the challenges of peace building and state building. I see many young people in the audience today, and we can all imagine the dramatic turns in history you will experience in your life. The IDFR provides us a vital service, not only by fostering discussions about the international challenges we face, but also emphasizing the importance of preparation and strategic foresight. It reminds us that the future belongs to those who dare be ready for it. Today, I want to begin by recalling an event that many considered probably the birth of a free Timor-Leste. Our history is a testament to resilience, determination, and the power of diplomacy. Like most Southeast Asian nations, our past was marked by centuries of European colonialism, followed by a difficult transition to independence. During the centuries of Portuguese rule, our people struggled against colonial overreach, including during periods of revolt and resistance. Then, in 1974, after the Carnation Revolution, this year, 50 years, Portugal began granting self-determination to its colonies. This opened the possibilities for our future. However, this was at a time of high international political tension in Southeast Asia. The war in Vietnam was raising Western fears of the spread of communism, and a year later, in April 1975, Saigon fell and communist governments came to power in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. It was against the political backdrop that we decided to take control of our destiny, and on 28th of November 1975, we made an unilateral declaration of independence. 9 days later, Indonesia invaded our country after being given the green light by the United States and Australia. Our people were forsaken by the major Western powers that remained silent or supported our annexation. For 24 years, long years, we waged a seemingly impossible fight, ill-equipped and outnumbered, against a giant that was supplied with arms by its Western allies. Yet, we had something greater than weaponry. We had a dream that had been carried in the hearts of our ancestors and passed down through generations. A dream that inspired us to continue the guerrilla campaign through the mountains and valleys of Timor. While our people stood firm and our guerrilla fighters endured hardships on the battlefield, others took up a different fight. On the diplomatic front, it was their duty. They carried our cause to the United Nations, to the capitals of the world, and to the ears of those with the courage to listen. We defied the odds, challenged the path history seemed to dictate, and relied on the bravery of individuals and nations who stood with us. These allies risked their own standing to support our people, even when it meant opposing the policies of their own governments. It was through leading with diplomacy that we were able to secure an independence referendum for our country, in which our people bravely exercised their right of self-determination. While many individuals contributed to the achievement of Timorese freedom, we must give particular credit to Kofi Annan, who was a giant of diplomacy. Kofi Annan was a man of great humanity who guided the United Nations with a sense of purpose, and who was determined to ensure that the Timorese people were given control over their own destiny. After we voted for independence, we faced the task of rebuilding a traumatized and impoverished society destroyed by years of war. And yet, we understood that the only way forward was with peace and reconciliation. Tolerance overcame vengeance. Forgiveness overcame hatred. We knew that independence and the sacrifices of our people would have no value, and that we could not achieve social harmony if the hearts of Timorese were filled with hatred and the desire for revenge. Through our experience, we understood that we would be unable to build our nation if the seeds of hatred and mistrust were planted in our society. Reconciliation was our prerequisite for national stability, which was then a requirement for development. Yet, we know that each nation has its own context, its own history, its own culture. However, I believe that all people yearn for the same thing, to live in peace and harmony. This is why I believe that dialogue is so important. Dialogue within every nation, an international dialogue respecting the sovereignty of each country where the powerful do not seek to impose their interest on the weak. What sets up apart as human beings is our deep ability to care, to show compassion, and to find strength in diversity. These qualities are the foundation of peace, progress, and justice. So, our story is one of hope, resilience, and the unshakable belief that justice can prevail, no matter how overwhelming the odds may seem. Please remember that even in the darkest of times, dreams can light the way to freedom. As we have seen in each era, diplomacy emerged as the most effective alternative to war and discord a mechanism to build bridges and create pathways. Today, diplomacy is needed more than ever. We face crises across the globe, exposing the fragility of our rules-based international order. One of the starkest examples of the ongoing tragedy in Gaza, a reminder of what happens when diplomacy fails. The situation in Gaza underscores the dire consequences of neglecting long-standing conflicts. The failure to resolve the Israel-Palestinian issue has created a cycle of despair, violence, devastating civilian lives, and eroding international norms. The situation in Gaza not only illustrates the collapse of international law, but also exposes their hypocrisy. We were recently encouraged by the announcement of a couple of days ago of a ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel. As we know from the history of this particular conflict, ceasefires are fragile, and there are already reports of each side accusing the other of violating the terms of the agreement. The worst thing was that I was invited. I went to Geneva for Ukrainian Peace Summit. When I went there, I was so encouraged, so motivated. That yes, during 24 years, with the Timorese people dying, and it was in total of more than 250,000 people that died during 24 years. In the case of Ukraine, every minute you can see more here, more this, more that, with Ukrainian people suffering. And when I was there, I went there, I was, we have all talk about peace, the need of peace. Many of us left the place very disappointed. Because it was not Ukraine Peace Summit. It was Ukraine War Summit. They didn't talk about the need of dialogue, the need of convincing each other, the both sides. What we heard was, we will give more money to buy weapons, to buy food for... It was not peace summit. It was to reaffirm the willing to continue the war, to win the war, but not thinking about the suffering of the people. And when I say the international law is not well used, as it is in the case like this. Of course, ceasefires do not mean peace, but rather an end to the violence, to allow some breathing room for political negotiations to take place. This can only occur when we move from hostility and mistrust to tolerance and reconciliation. They asked me, some journalists, they asked me, and what are you thinking about the peace in Ukraine? I said, Ukraine and Russia must be sitting on the same table just to stop. Nothing. Yeah, Putin, we put more money. And now we are seeing in the European Union, because all the money go to the Ukraine, their own people are suffering economically. This is the world leaders. That is why we are here in Southeast Asia. Please, young people, have a dream. We all have to build a world without war, without peace. We hope that when you raise up, you will build a world of peace and harmonization. Because the state of the world today shows just how fragile and elusive peace can be. The growing tide of intolerance and extremism, often cloaked under the guise of nationalism, continues to threaten the very fabric of our shared humanity. And while the world focuses on Gaza and Ukraine, we must not forget rising conflict and unrest across the globe, from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the Central African Republic, Sudan, Yemen, to Haiti, and in our region. A few years ago, I was invited to go to Milan by FAO. And they said, yes, there is food, there is land. What is lost? The problem, and I told them, in Milan. From Africa, essentially in the north, they are going to Europe. And many are dying in the Mediterranean Sea. Why? I asked the leaders to think about this. Why? They have a lot of land. They can grow rice and everything. but they are dying of hunger, and they are trying to get a place in Europe to have something to eat. Why? Because of the conflict. The international community, instead of going and solve the conflict, they talk more about how they can help the survivors of the Mediterranean attempts. They don't see the real cause of the problem. And more, if in a country there is oil and gas or something, some resources, they give money to different groups to fight each other while they took everything because the government of the country cannot do everything. In Central African Republic, is almost cheered at almost 3 decades of peacekeeping force. No peace, they are there, money. And a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, it was proved that the mafia gave to the peacekeeping force and they bring to Europe, their country, diamond or gold. We are in a very, very disordered world. As developed countries pursue industrialization and economic growth with little regard for the environment, it is developing countries, especially small island developing states and the least developed countries, that are now most vulnerable to climate change. As diplomats, it will be a challenge, but a necessity to manage the rise of China and make sure that our countries are not drawn into geostrategic competition between China and the United States. And we must do this in the context of the rise of middle powers and the transition to a multipolar world. This transition to a multipolar world is becoming even more complex with the rise of nationalism, isolationism, and global disorder. And with all this change and fragility, we must also face the challenge of technological advances and the rise of artificial intelligence. We are paradoxically witnessing how the misuse of social media fosters division, spreads misinformation, and amplifies hatred. It will be important that we work to make sure that artificial intelligence becomes a force for good in the world and not a tool of division, oppression, and surveillance. Ladies and gentlemen, during the Timorese resistance struggle, we had a major force on the side of our people: international law and international system. Today, in this fragmented and fragile world, and with the collapse of international law, the effectiveness of our global institutions is coming into question. With international institutions struggling, regional cooperation offers constructive pathways for international cooperation and the consolidation of peace. We have seen ASEAN successfully foster peace, cooperation, and economic growth in a dynamic region with great diversity. Timor-Leste is proud to share in this vision. As a small nation, we know that we cannot go it alone in our region, and we understand the strength of regional solidarity and want to contribute to peace and sustainable development. Dear friends, Timor-Leste is also a proud member of G7+, a coalition of fragile and conflict-affected states committed to building resilience through mutual support and shared learning. Our journey from conflict to nationhood has taught us that development cannot be achieved in isolation. It requires robust institutions, inclusive governance, and effective diplomacy. Diplomacy for us is not just about high-level negotiations. It is about listening, learning, sharing experiences, and acting in ways that make a difference on the ground. Diplomacy should lead the way, carrying the torch of empathy and respect, reminding us of what unites us rather than what divides us. The G7+ has shown how fragile states can unite to amplify their voices on the international stage. By working together, we have highlighted the importance of country-led solutions and the need of global policies that respect the unique situations of the country. Diplomacy has been our tool for turning shared vulnerability into collective strength. Ladies and gentlemen, as we look to the future, we must invest in the next generation of diplomats. The world needs skilled negotiators, bridge builders, and advocates for dialogue and reconciliation. As we face a world of disorder, we need people who can develop a new global vision. Institutions like IDFR play a critical role in nurturing the talent. As we confront challenges like climate change, economic inequality, and geopolitical conflict, we must remember that diplomacy is our most powerful. It is diplomacy that transforms differences into dialogue, conflict into cooperation, and aspirations into achievements. Every diplomat holds a sacred duty to be a messenger of peace and a champion of justice, representing the very best of what it means to be human. Dear friends, the challenges we face today require collective effort. Regionalism, multilateralism, and diplomacy are not just ideals, they are necessities. Timor-Leste is committed to playing its part. Let us remember that diplomacy at its core is about believing in the possibility of a better future and working tirelessly to make it a reality. Thank you very much for being patient and listening.